Nobody at Northbridge believed a girl like me could be dangerous. That was the most useful thing about being underestimated. People left their knives on the table and assumed you would only use them to cut fruit. I was scholarship-born, cafeteria quiet, neat braided, always 3 minutes early, always wearing the same polished shoes because I couldn't afford a second pair. Adrian was different. Adrian floated through the corridors with prefect badges, piano fingers, clean cologne, and teachers who laughed too loudly at his harmless jokes. His father chaired the school foundation. His mother donated the glass study wing. His face was on every brochure, every prize night slideshow, every Northbridge Excellence banner that made poor students like me look like grateful decoration. I had known him for 2 years before my first death, and for most of that time I thought he was kind. He saved seats. He lent highlighters. He remembered birthdays. He told nervous Year 9 debaters that shaking hands meant their arguments were alive. But kindness, I had learned too late, could be a costume, and Adrian wore his formal uniform, perfectly tailored, always pressed and removed the moment nobody important was watching. In my last life, he did not sabotage me with one dramatic act. He did it like a patient surgeon. First, he praised my prep in front of everyone. Then, he borrowed my notes to organize team consistency. Then, he swapped the side allocations posted outside the hall, guided me into the wrong prep room, handed me a fake printout, and said we were arguing affirmative. I believed him because he was my captain. I believed him because everyone believed him. I believed him until the moderator introduced Northbridge as the negative side, and my entire opening speech collapsed in my throat like wet paper. The audience laughed politely at first, then loudly. Adrian looked shocked. Not guilty. Shocked. That was his talent. He could betray you and still look like the first person to discover the body. In that old life, I tried to recover. I stood there under the stage lights, fingers frozen around useless cards, and argued against my own assigned burden while the opposing team picked me apart line by line. Every time I reached for evidence, I realized the evidence supported the other side. Every time I tried to pivot, Adrian sent me a look from the second speaker's table that said, "Don't make this worse." When his turn came, he stepped up with my stolen analysis polished into gold. He corrected our unfortunate confusion, apologized to the panel, and rebuilt the case from his own emergency framework, which was really the framework I had written at 2:14 a.m. with instant coffee burning my tongue. The room loved him for saving us. The judges praised his adaptability. Our coach said Adrian had rescued Northbridge from disaster. And me? I became the disaster. By Monday, screenshots of my opening speech were clipped with captions, "Scholarship girl can't read the side." Someone edited dramatic violin music over my pause. Adrian told people I had hidden prep from the team because I wanted individual glory. Then a plagiarism report appeared, claiming my practice brief matched Adrian's private notes. His private notes. My words, his name. The scholarship committee suspended me. The debate council banned me for misconduct. My mother cried in the kitchen with one hand over her mouth, so my little brother wouldn't hear. I wrote appeals, letters, timelines, but Northbridge protected its prince like a national monument. I left school 2 months before graduation. That winter, after 3 nights without sleep and one more rejection email, I crossed the road in rain I could barely see through and woke up to nothing but applause. His applause. His national championship speech. His face on the news saying, "Debate taught me integrity." So when I returned to that same prep room, that same storm rattling the windows, that same boy asking for my cards, I did not scream. Screaming was for girls who still believed the world came running when something unfair happened. I simply loosened my grip and placed the stack neatly on the table. "Of course," I said. "I wouldn't want to mess up again." Adrian's smile twitched, just once, too small for the others to notice. Across the room, our coach, Ms. Hahn, was arguing with the printer, and the other 2 team members, Lila and Marcus, were whispering about lunch. Nobody heard the way Adrian lowered his voice when he leaned closer. "Good girl," he murmured. In my last life, those 2 words had made me feel chosen. This time, they made something sharp and bright open inside me. He lifted the cards. They looked perfect, color-coded, tabbed, numbered, exactly the kind of cards I was known for making. Blue for definition, green for principled argument, yellow for evidence, red for rebuttal blocks. My handwriting was careful. My citations were real. The structure was elegant enough to tempt any thief. But every single card had been written for the wrong side, and not in an obvious way. That would have been amateur revenge. No, my decoy brief was a trap built from silk thread. It looked like a negative case at first glance, full of language about transparency, accountability, and psychological harm. But embedded inside each contention was an affirmative concession. Every weighing mechanism strengthened the other side. Every statistic was framed with one missing qualifier. Every rebuttal block began with a sentence that sounded devastating until the second sentence, quietly, surrendered the round. It was a case that would not collapse in prep. It would collapse only when spoken aloud in front of judges trained to hear contradictions. A beautiful disaster. A glass staircase. Adrian ran his thumb over the tabs, eyes glittering. "You've improved," he said. "These are cleaner than usual." I tilted my head. I stayed up all night. That part was true, just not last night. The real cards were nowhere near my hands. They were not in my bag, not in my locker, not in my laptop folder, not in the cloud account Adrian had once somehow accessed after helping me reset my password. My real case was divided into 3 places he would never search because boys like Adrian only looked where they expected value to be. The framework was written in tiny print on the inside cover of my battered copy of Frankenstein, the one he once called Poverty Aesthetic. The evidence cards were folded inside an empty sanitary pad wrapper in the side pocket of my pencil case, because Adrian would rather lose a limb than touch anything that reminded him girls had bodies. The final rebuttal blocks were memorized, not written, because death had a way of improving your memory. During my old life's disgrace, I had replayed every judge comment, every opposition argument, every moment I should have answered differently. I had rehearsed the winning case in my head for months, not because I expected a second chance, but because regret is a cruel tutor and I had been its best student. Now, while Adrian skimmed the decoy cards, I watched his expression change from concern to hunger. He thought he was reading my best work. He thought he had caught me before I could hide it. He thought the universe had once again placed a quiet girl beside him, so he could climb on her spine. Then he tucked my decoy cards beneath his folder and said loudly, "Mira, I'll reorganize these for team flow. Don't worry." MS han glanced over, relieved. "Thank you, Adrian." "Mira, let him coordinate. We need discipline today." Discipline. That word almost made me laugh. Here was the part nobody understood about debate. The speeches were only the visible battlefield. The real war happened before anyone stepped onto the stage. It happened inside allocation slips, prep room access, evidence sharing, speaker orders, judge preferences, timing sheets, and the silent politics of who was considered reliable before they opened their mouth. Adrian had mastered that hidden war. In my last life, he didn't just steal from me. He arranged the room so that every exit looked like guilt. This time, I arranged it first. At 7:10 that morning, before he arrived, I had taken a photo of the official side allocation posted outside the auditorium. Northbridge negative. I sent it to myself, to Lila, to Marcus, and to the debate council's automated attendance email with a subject line confirming side allocation for records. At 7:16, I asked the student volunteer at registration, a year 10 named Priya with braces and nervous hands, to initial my printed copy because Ms. Han likes documentation. At 7:22, I placed my phone on voice memo and slid it into my blazer pocket before entering prep room B. At 7:29, Adrian arrived, rain shining in his hair like he had been filmed in slow motion. At 7:31, he asked where my cards were. At 7:32, I showed him the decoys. At 7:34, he touched them without permission. At 7:35, he said, "Good girl." The recording caught it all. That did not mean the school would believe me. Northbridge could ignore evidence the way rich people ignored price tags. But I was not building a complaint. I was building a stage. The first pattern break came 20 minutes into prep, when Adrian realized I was not panicking. In my last life, I had hovered beside him like a desperate assistant, asking what I should do, trying to be useful, trying to earn back the approval he had withdrawn. This time, I sat by the window with Frankenstein open, calmly highlighting a passage about created monsters turning against their makers. He looked at me once.
Twice.
Then a third time longer. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm thinking."
About what?
"Burden." The word landed between us like a dropped blade. Adrian's smile returned, but thinner.
Evenhendeld burden.
"Your job is to deliver cleanly." "Of course." I looked back at my book. He did not know the real framework was under my thumb. He did not know that every highlighted word corresponded to a point: visibility, consent, institutional power, reversible harm. The motion sounded dry to outsiders, just another academic policy debate, but Northbridge students understood the stakes. Our school used anonymous ranking boards every term. They posted numbers without names, pretending privacy made it ethical, while everyone decoded each other through scores, seating, teacher comments, and panic. Students became ghosts chasing digits. Parents donated based on rank predictions. Teachers encouraged excellence by letting us watch ourselves fall. Adrian loved that system because he always stood at the top, glowing under the disguise of merit. I hated it because I knew how easily anonymous numbers could become weapons. My real negative case was not that rankings were kind. It was that abolishing anonymity without abolishing ranking itself would make harm worse. Names would attach permanently to failure. Wealthy families would pressure staff harder. Scholarship students would become targets. The affirmative wanted sunlight. I would argue that sunlight without shelter burns the people already exposed. At 8:05, Ms. Hahn called for speaker order. Adrian leaned back before anyone else spoke. "I'll take second," he said. "Mira can open. She's been working on definitions." My pulse stayed even. In my last life, he had made me first speaker because first speaker holds the burden and collapses fastest if the side is wrong. He expected me to walk on stage with a decoy case, announce arguments that secretly supported the affirmative, and ruin the round before he saved us. But I had prepared for this too. "Actually," I said, "I think Adrian should open." The room went still. Marcus blinked. Lila's pen stopped moving.
MS. Han ned. Why?
I let my voice go small enough to sound deferential, but clear enough to be recorded. "He has the team folder now." He reorganized my cards. "It makes sense for the captain to set burden if he's coordinating strategy." Adrian's eyes narrowed for half a second. There it was, the first crack in the marble. He couldn't refuse without admitting he had taken my cards for himself. He couldn't insist I open without looking selfish in front of Ms. Hahn. He couldn't say the cards were mine, because he had just claimed coordination. So he smiled. "That's fine," he said. "I can open." Ms. Hahn nodded, already turning back to her clipboard.
"Good."
Adrian first, Mira second, Marcus third. Lila reserve. In my old life, I had died in the first speech. In this life, I handed him the coffin and let him polish it. Still, Adrian was not stupid. That was why he was dangerous. A stupid villain trips over his own pride before the audience arrives. Adrian tested doors. He sent Lila to check the draw, then watched whether I reacted. I didn't. He asked Marcus to compare our prepared definitions with last year's council standards, then glanced at me when Marcus said our wording sounded affirmative-ish. I kept highlighting Frankenstein. He flipped through the decoy cards faster. Then he pulled one yellow evidence card out and held it up. "This statistic says named ranking increases teacher intervention by 41%, he said softly. "That sounds like their side." I looked up with mild surprise. "Only if you don't read the methodology." He turned the card over. I had written in tiny letters, "Short-term intervention rose, but long-term stigma rose faster in under-resourced cohorts." It was a real study, and it did support a negative angle, but only if framed carefully. The decoy card, however, framed it carelessly later on. Adrian relaxed. "Right." He slid it back. His suspicion faded because he had found one explanation and assumed all unease had been resolved. That was his weakness. He believed intelligence was ownership. If he understood a piece, he thought he controlled the whole. He did not realize the trap was not in the facts. The trap was in the sequence. The second pattern break arrived when Mr. Calder entered. Mr. Calder was the debate council liaison, a narrow man with silver glasses who treated rulebooks like scripture and students like possible clerical errors. In my last life, Adrian had spoken to him privately before the round, and somehow the side allocation sheet disappeared. This time, I stood before Adrian could. "Sir," I said, "could you confirm Northbridge is negative for the semifinal? I sent the registration photo earlier, but I'd like verbal confirmation because our captain is organizing the team folder." Mr. Calder blinked, surprised by the precision. "Northbridge is negative. Eastmere is affirmative. It's also on the hall sheet." "Thank you." I smiled, then turned to Adrian. "Just so we're all aligned." The words were innocent. The recording in my pocket drank them greedily. Adrian's fingers tightened around the decoy cards. For the first time, he understood I was documenting the room. Not enough to accuse me. Not enough to stop. Just enough to make him uncomfortable. That discomfort mattered. Debate rounds are won by rhythm as much as logic. A speaker who feels watched starts editing himself. A thief who feels noticed starts rushing the theft. And a prince who has never been challenged in public begins mistaking every shadow for rebellion. At 8:40, we moved toward the auditorium. The hallway outside was crowded with blazers, wet umbrellas, parents pretending not to be competitive, and students whispering predictions. Northbridge was expected to win. Adrian was expected to shine. I was expected to be useful, which is a polite word for invisible. A group of Year 11 girls by the trophy case waved at Adrian and whispered his name like it was a brand. He gave them a humble smile. One of them looked at me and said, not quietly enough, "She's lucky she gets to stand next to him." In my previous life, that would have stung. In this life, it almost amused me. Luck was being reborn with memory. Luck was watching the boy who ruined you walk willingly toward the stage with poisoned cards pressed to his chest. Before we entered the auditorium, Adrian stepped close enough that his sleeve brushed mine. "Mira," he said, voice low, "don't improvise today." I looked at him. Why would I? His gaze searched mine. Because sometimes people who feel overlooked try to prove something. A laugh almost escaped me. He was warning me against the exact hunger that lived in him. "I'm not trying to prove anything," I said. "I'm just here to debate the correct side." His jaw flexed. Then the usher opened the door, and applause spilled into the hallway like weather. The auditorium looked exactly as I remembered, which was the cruelest part. Same polished floor. Same blue banners. Same judge's table with 3 water glasses. Same digital timer at the front. Same rows of students hungry for someone else's mistake. In my old life, those lights had made me feel exposed. Every flaw magnified. Now they felt like surgical lamps. Useful.
Clean.
Unforgiving. Eastmere's team sat opposite us, led by a girl named Sienna Park, whose sharp bob and sharper eyes had once dismantled me with almost merciful efficiency. In that life, I hated her for embarrassing me. Later, I realized she had simply done what debaters do, attack the argument placed before them. Adrian was the one who placed me there bleeding. Sienna glanced at me now and gave a small nod, competitor to competitor. I nodded back. Adrian noticed. Of course he noticed. He liked admiration but disliked alliances he did not authorize. The moderator read the motion. This house would abolish anonymous academic ranking systems. Then came side confirmation. Northbridge Academy, negative. Eastmere College, affirmative. The words rang clear through the microphone.
No confusión. No swapped cheat. No escape.
Adrian rose for first speaker, with my decoy cards in his hand. For the first 30 seconds, he sounded magnificent. I will not lie, even now. Adrian had a voice that made weak arguments stand straighter. He thanked the chair, defined academic ranking systems, framed anonymity as a shield used by institutions to avoid accountability, and then said, "As negative, we do not defend cruelty. We defend meaningful reform over performative visibility." It was close enough to my real line that my stomach tightened. He had always been good at stealing tone. But then he reached the first decoy step. Our first contention is that anonymity prevents targeted stigma by separating identity from performance, he said.
Good. Correct.
Then he continued, reading the green card almost word for word. However, because students and teachers already infer identity through classroom patterns, anonymous ranking creates a false privacy that prevents intervention while allowing social decoding to continue unchecked. The lead judge's pen paused. Sienna's head tilted. Adrian did not notice. He pressed on, confidence carrying him over the edge. Therefore, the problem is not naming students, but refusing to name responsibility. That sentence sounded powerful. It was also affirmative. I watched Sienna write it down with the calm focus of a person seeing an unlocked door. Adrian moved to evidence. In schools where ranking identities were disclosed, teacher intervention increased by 41% in the first assessment cycle. He smiled, thinking he had landed a blow. But he had just handed Eastmere a statistic supporting abolition of anonymity. Then he tried to weigh it negative. This proves anonymity is harmful, but abolition alone is insufficient. The lead judge's eyebrows drew together. Insufficient does not mean oppose. In policy debate, if your argument proves the motion helps but not enough, you are not negative. You are affirmative with complaints. The old me would have panicked for him. That is embarrassing to admit, but true. Even after Adrian ruined me, some ghost of the girl I had been wanted to rescue the team, rescue the room. Rescue the idea that I had not spent years admiring a monster. But Rebirth had burned that softness down to bone. I sat still and flowed his speech. Every concession, every contradiction, every moment his beautiful voice braided a rope around his own throat. By contention, too, the audience sensed something was wrong, though most could not name it. Adrian argued that anonymous rankings worsen anxiety because students obsessed over hidden numbers, then claimed keeping anonymity was necessary to protect mental health. He argued that disclosure empowered parents to demand support, then warned that disclosure privileged wealthy parents who could demand support. He argued that abolition would expose scholarship students, then quoted a study showing anonymous ranking already exposed scholarship students through performance clustering. It was not nonsense. Nonsense would have been easier to dismiss. It was worse. It was almost brilliant. Almost coherent, almost devastating, except every road led subtly to Eastmere's side. His timing slipped. He skipped a red card. He returned to it. He repeated the comparative is not visibility versus invisibility 3 times, each time less certain. At 6 minutes, the warning bell rang. He looked down, realized he had 2 contentions left, and did what arrogant speakers do when drowning. He sped up. In conclusion, because anonymity creates unaccountable harm, because visibility allows targeted intervention, and because reforms must address power rather than hide behind privacy, this House must, he stopped. The word hanging in front of him was obvious. Must abolish. He swallowed. Must not accept the simplistic mechanism proposed. The ending landed crooked. Polite applause followed. Not thunder. Not yet. Sienna Park rose like a blade being drawn. The negative's first speaker has made our case for us, she began, and the auditorium sharpened. Adrian's face did not change, but I saw color climb his neck. Sienna was merciless because the round invited mercy for no one. She grouped his concessions into 3 clean admissions. Anonymity fails to protect identity, anonymity delays intervention, and anonymity hides institutional responsibility. The negative tells you abolition is insufficient, she said. But insufficiency is not opposition. If the house is on fire, the fact that water will not rebuild the kitchen does not mean we keep the flames. The audience murmured. Judges wrote. Ms. Hahn stiffened beside us. Adrian stared at his flow pad as if the right argument might appear through force of pedigree. Then Sienna did something I had prayed she would. She quoted him exactly. Their opening speaker says, and I wrote this carefully, the problem is not naming students, but refusing to name responsibility. We agree. That is why anonymous systems must be abolished. A few Eastmere students snapped quietly before remembering this was not a university chamber. I kept my expression neutral. Inside, something ancient and bruised sat up straight. This was not petty revenge. This was correction. The room was hearing him clearly for once. When Sienna sat down, Adrian leaned toward me, still smiling for anyone watching. "Fix it," he whispered. In my previous life, he had whispered the same thing after leading me into disaster. Fix it meant absorb the blame. Fix it meant contradict yourself so I can look stable. Fix it meant bleed quietly. I turned a page in my notebook. Of course. Then I stood. For a heartbeat, the stage lights returned me to the worst moment of my first life. My mouth dry, my cards wrong, laughter crawling over my skin. My fingers touched the edge of Frankenstein inside my folder, and the fear passed through me like a train that did not stop. "Madam Chair, adjudicators, members of the House," I began. My voice was lower than I remembered. Steadier. "Before I rebuild this debate, I want to clarify what Northbridge actually opposes." A tiny shift moved through the room. Adrian's pen stopped. Ms. Han's head snapped up. I did not look at either of them. "We do not stand here to romanticize anonymous ranking. We agree it can be harmful. But the motion before us does not ask whether anonymous ranking is perfect. It asks whether abolishing anonymity in schools that still rank students creates more justice or simply attaches names to an already unequal weapon." The lead judge looked up.
Good.
I gave them the real framework in 4 clean burdens. The affirmative must prove disclosure improves outcomes for vulnerable students, that intervention cannot occur without naming, that safeguards will survive unequal parental pressure, and that the harms of permanent identification do not outweigh the benefits of visibility. "Our side is simple," I said. "Do not confuse removing a mask with removing the knife." That sentence changed the room. I felt it happen. Debate rooms have weather, and this one shifted from awkward curiosity to attention. I rebuilt from the ground. First, I conceded limited harms because denying reality loses trust. Then, I separated anonymity from institutional neglect. If teachers fail to intervene when numbers are anonymous, the failure is not the absence of names. The failure is the absence of duty. Schools already possess the data. They know which student corresponds to which rank. The public naming of children is not required for private support. The second judge nodded slightly. I moved to vulnerable students. Abolition sounds equal because every name is revealed equally. But equal exposure does not create equal consequences. A wealthy student named at rank 50 receives tutoring. A scholarship student named at rank 50 receives suspicion, pity, and sometimes removal from opportunity. The affirmative gives everyone a spotlight and pretends everyone has the same shelter from heat. I saw Sienna write quickly. Good. Make her work. Then I turned Adrian's accidental concessions into controlled ground. You heard our first speaker discuss social decoding. That does not prove anonymity is useless. It proves schools must strengthen privacy and intervention protocols. When a lock is weak, you repair the lock. You do not remove the door. A murmur ran through Northbridge's side.
MS. Han exhaled.
Adrian's posture eased for half a second, thinking I was saving him. He did not understand that I was saving the round, not him. Then I began the part that belonged only to me. This debate is not about whether students deserve to be seen. It is about who gets to control the terms of being seen. The room quieted. The affirmative imagines a kind school where naming a rank summons support. But policies do not operate in imagined schools. They operate in real schools, with donors, reputations, parent pressure, scholarship conditions, teacher bias, and teenage cruelty. Attach a name to a low rank, and you have not created accountability. You may have created a target. I did not mention myself. I did not mention the future that had already happened. But my voice carried the weight of every anonymous ranking board I had stared at while classmates guessed which poor kid belonged at the bottom. I gave them examples. Students with language barriers, students recovering from illness, students hiding unsafe homes, students whose parents measured worth in numbers. I explained how private data can trigger support without public exposure. I offered a countermodel. Retain anonymity publicly, mandate internal intervention thresholds, require opt-in student conferences, publish school-level accountability without naming children. It was clean, humane, difficult to attack. Most importantly, it was unmistakably negative. By the time the 6-minute bell rang, the judges were flowing me as the real first speaker. Adrian knew it too. I saw it in the way he refused to look at me when I sat down. The third pattern break happened during Crossfire. Adrian expected gratitude. He expected me to return from the podium breathless and relieved, maybe whisper, "Was that okay?" Instead, I placed my real cards face down and took a sip of water.
He leaned in.
"Where did that come from?"
"Prep," I said.
"That wasn't in the folder." No, his smile stayed on, but his eyes hardened. "Why not?" I finally turned to him. "You had the folder you wanted." For one dangerous second, the mask slipped. His expression became not angry exactly, but offended, as if a chair had refused to be sat on. Then Marcus stood for our third speech, and Adrian had to become captain again. Marcus was a decent debater, nervous but honest. In the old life, he froze after my collapse, then later avoided me because guilt is easier to carry from a distance. This time, he followed the framework I had built and did well enough. Not brilliant, but stable. He hammered Eastmere on unequal consequences and asked why private intervention could not solve their best harms. Sienna's team fought back hard, arguing anonymity enabled schools to hide patterns of neglect and that disclosure need not mean public humiliation if handled properly. It became a real debate. That mattered to me more than I expected. I had not returned only to destroy Adrian. I had returned to reclaim the thing he had stolen, the right to compete honestly. But Adrian was not finished unraveling. In reply prep, he snatched my notebook. Not violently, not visibly, just fast enough that a teacher looking over would see teamwork. "I'll handle reply," he said.
"No, irablia."
The word was quiet. He stared at me like I had spoken another language. "Excuse me? I'm taking reply." "Mira, don't be emotional." There it was, the oldest leash. A boy can sabotage an entire case and call it strategy. A girl can object once and become emotional. I smiled because the voice memo was still running. "I'm not emotional. I'm second speaker, I rebuilt the clash, and I have the cleanest weighing." Miss Han, who had been pretending not to listen, looked over. Adrian immediately softened. "I'm only saying reply requires experience. Then I'll get some." Marcus coughed into his sleeve to hide a laugh. Lila's eyes widened like she was watching a live animal escape a cage.
MS. Han hesitated.
In the past, she would have chosen Adrian automatically. This time, choosing him meant ignoring what everyone had just seen. He had muddied the opening. I had restored it. Her loyalty to hierarchy collided with her fear of losing. "Fear won." "Mira takes reply," she said. Adrian's smile remained. His hand around my notebook turned white. Then he released it. There are victories so small nobody claps, but they rearrange the bones inside you. Taking reply was one of them. In my first life, Adrian had used reply to erase me. He stood there with my stolen words and framed the round as a heroic rescue from my incompetence. Now I stood for Northbridge's final speech while he sat behind me, trapped in silence by the format he had once controlled. Reply speeches do not introduce new material. They tell judges how to see what already happened. So, I told them. "This round has 3 questions," I said. First, does naming students create support? Second, who bears the risk when ranking becomes identifiable? Third, which side offers accountability without exposure? I weighed calmly. Eastmere had the emotional clarity of abolition, but we had the practical mechanism. Eastmere proved anonymous ranking can be abused, but we proved naming students is not the necessary cure. Eastmere wanted visibility. We asked visibility for whom, by whom, and at what cost. Then I used Adrian carefully, not to embarrass him, but to box the round. Both teams agree ranking systems can harm students. The disagreement is whether abolishing anonymity reduces that harm or redistributes it onto the most vulnerable names. The judges followed. I could feel them following. When I ended, I did not look at Adrian. I looked at the panel. Do not reward a policy because it sounds brave to reveal names. Reward the side that protects students when bravery is demanded from those with the least power to refuse. This time, the applause was real. We won the semi-final on a split decision. Northbridge students cheered because they loved victory more than they understood it. Ms. Han clasped Adrian's shoulder first out of habit, then mine out of necessity. Excellent recovery, she said. The word recovery was poison wrapped in praise. Recovery from what? From whom? But I only nodded. Adrian accepted congratulations with the brittle grace of a prince whose crown had tightened. Parents praised his opening complexity, which was how adults described confusion when the confused person was rich. But the judge's oral feedback was less forgiving. The lead judge, a university coach with tired eyes, said, Northbridge's first speech conceded significant affirmative ground. The second speaker did substantial work reframing the negative burden, and the reply clarified the comparative. Without that, I likely vote Eastmere. He looked directly at me. Well done. A simple sentence. 2 words. In my old life, I would have lived a month on that praise. Now I accepted it like evidence entered into record. Adrian's jaw moved once. Outside the auditorium, while students swarmed the snack table, he cornered me by the notice board where the side allocations still hung untouched. What game are you playing? He asked. Not charming now. Not gentle. The hallway was noisy enough to hide us, but my phone was still recording. Debate, I said. Don't do that. Do what? Act innocent. His laugh was soft and ugly. You think one good speech makes you special? I looked at him, then really looked. He was beautiful in the way expensive things are beautiful, polished to distract from how easily they break. No, I said. I think one bad speech makes you nervous. His hand shot out and gripped my wrist. Not hard enough to bruise if anyone checked, but hard enough to remind me that politeness was only his public language. Careful, Mira. My body remembered fear before my mind approved it. For 1 second, I was back in the rain, back under headlights, back reading the email that said my appeal had been denied. Then I twisted my wrist free using the same motion my mother taught me when I was 13, and a man on the train held my sleeve too long. Adrian blinked, shocked less by the escape than by the fact I knew how. Don't touch me, I said. A teacher passed nearby, and Adrian's face transformed instantly. Concern returned. You're stressed, he said louder. I get it. Big day. The teacher smiled sympathetically at him. Of course. But the difference between this life and the last was simple. This time, I was not trying to convince the hallway. I was collecting the hallway. His grip, his warning, his volume shift, all of it lived now in my pocket with timestamps. I walked away before he could regain rhythm. Behind me, I heard Lila say, Did he just grab you? I paused, turned, and met her eyes. In my old life, Lila had stayed silent until it was too late. This time, I gave her a chance earlier. Yes, I said.
He did.
Her face changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. The final motion was released at noon. This was the part one had feared most because Rebirth does not guarantee every event repeats. A storm can move. A judge can fall sick. A printer can jam at the wrong moment. Revenge built on perfect repetition is just another kind of arrogance. When Mr. Calder unfolded the paper and read, This house would require schools to publish all disciplinary decisions in anonymized form, I almost laughed. Not the same motion as my old final. Similar theme, different battlefield. Good. Better. A true second chance should not be a script copied from the first. It should test whether you learned the principle. Adrian recovered faster than I expected. He stepped toward Mr. Calder with his captain's smile. Sighed. Northbridge affirmative, Mr. Calder said. Adrian's eyes flickered to me. Affirmative. That meant my decoy cards from the morning were not directly usable anymore. He knew it. I knew it. For a second, triumph warmed his face. He thought the trap had expired. He thought we were back in open water, where charm could swim. Then Ms. Hahn said, Prep room A, 30 minutes. Adrian, Mira, coordinate together. Coordinate. The word returned, but its ownership had changed. Adrian leaned, close as we walked. Looks like your hidden genius needs me after all. I smiled. Maybe. That was the most dangerous word in debate. Maybe invites people to step closer to the whole. Final prep was chaos. A new motion means no one has perfect cards. You build from principles, analogies, and whatever research you can ethically access under tournament rules. Publication of anonymized disciplinary decisions sounded transparent, but it carried landmines: privacy, deterrence, institutional accountability, public trust, inconsistent punishment, restorative justice. As affirmative, we had to argue that schools should publish decisions without names to expose patterns and prevent secret favoritism. It was a motion designed for Northbridge to hate, because Northbridge survived by burying consequences under polished newsletters. Adrian should have been good at it. He knew secrecy intimately. But he had a problem now. He did not trust my visible cards, and he did not know where my real thinking lived. Suspicion slowed him. While he argued for broad definitions, I built the model. Publish termly reports, I said. Anonymized, with offense category, sanction range, appeal outcome, and safeguarding exceptions. Marcus nodded. Lila added, include demographic audits? Careful, I said. Aggregated patterns, not identifiable traits in small cohorts. Adrian watched us like a king watching villagers discover fire. You're overcomplicating, he said. The emotional line is simple. Sunlight disinfects. Sunlight also exposes children, I replied. That was literally your opening problem this morning. Marcus looked down quickly. Lila pressed her lips together. Adrian's smile went cold. Don't confuse one's speech with expertise. Then he made his second mistake. He tried to steal again, but this time he had no time to examine the knife. I wrote 3 clean affirmative pillars on a visible sheet: accountability, consistency, trust. Beside them, I wrote examples and impact lines. They were good enough to use, but not complete. The missing piece was a weighing mechanism around anonymization as a middle path, exposing institutions, not children. I kept that in my head. Adrian waited until Ms. Han stepped outside to answer a call, then lifted the visible sheet. I'll open with this. Lila frowned. I thought Mira was opening the final. Mira did reply last round, he said smoothly. We need balance. Balance was another word men used when they meant restoration of their comfort. I shrugged. Adrian can open. Everyone looked at me, surprised. Adrian most of all. He expected resistance. I gave him permission. But permission is not surrender when you control what is being permitted. The visible sheet lacked traps this time. It was simply incomplete. If he spoke from it, he would sound persuasive for 3 minutes and shallow for the rest. He would set up a case I could deepen, but he would not own the heart of it. More importantly, he would reveal whether he could build without my hidden cards. I already knew the answer. I wanted the judges to know too. Before the final, Adrian disappeared for 6 minutes. In my old life, that disappearance had preceded the side allocation swap. This time, I followed at a distance. He went not to Mr. Calder, but to the media table where student volunteers uploaded speech clips to the school live stream. He spoke to a boy I recognized from the tech club, slid something across the table, and pointed toward the camera. My stomach tightened. New timeline, same instinct. Control the record. I moved closer behind a display board advertising integrity through excellence. The irony nearly made me cough. Adrian's voice was low, but not low enough. Just make sure the semi-final opening clip isn't posted separately, he said. Use the team montage. And if anyone asks, audio had issues. The tech boy looked uncomfortable. Mr. Calder checks uploads. I'll handle Calder. Adrian's tone sweetened. You want foundation internship hours, right? There it was. Not theft of cards. Theft of evidence. I stepped out before the boy answered. Audio issues? I asked. Adrian turned slowly. For once, he did not have a ready expression. The tech boy went pale. I looked at him, not unkindly. Don't risk yourself for someone else's panic. Then I walked away. I did not threaten. I did not need to. By the time we reached the final auditorium, the semi-final clip had already been uploaded in full. Lila sent me the link with 3 exclamation marks and a message. I saved it too. The final crowd was larger. Word had spread that Northbridge almost threw semi-final and somehow survived. That is the thing about public mistakes. They attract more witnesses to the next one. Adrian loved crowds when they came to worship. He hated them when they came to verify. The judging panel changed for finals, adding Dr. Mera, a former national champion known for asking brutal points of information with a smile of someone offering tea. As first speaker, Adrian opened beautifully again. Secrecy is where power launders its favorites, he said. Strong line. Mine, partly, though improved by his performance. He defined publication, anonymization, disciplinary decisions. He gave the accountability pillar, the consistency pillar, the trust pillar. For 3 minutes, he sounded like the prince everyone came to see. Then Dr. Mera raised her hand for a point. Adrian accepted, because refusing early looks weak. How does your model prevent identification in small year groups where a serious incident is already known socially? She asked. The missing weighing mechanism. The hidden heart. Adrian smiled. Because anonymization removes names. Dr. Mera waited. The audience waited. But if everyone already knows the incident, she pressed, then the report doesn't worsen knowledge. It formalizes accountability. That was not terrible, but it was incomplete. For whom, she asked. The institution or the student? Adrian glanced down at the visible sheet. Nothing there. Both in different ways. A vague answer is a debt with interest. The opposition would collect. They did. West Haven Grammar, our final opponent, had a first speaker with round glasses and a deceptively soft voice. He thanked Adrian for proving their concern. Anonymized publication could become naming by context. He argued that discipline requires rehabilitation, not public cataloging. He painted scenarios where students from small minorities, scholarship programs, or known incidents could be identified despite removed names. For a moment, I felt the old fear again, not because he was right entirely, but because he was close enough to matter. Adrian sat beside me, jaw tight, whispering, "You better have something."
I did.
Of course I did. But I let him sit with the uncertainty for 10 full seconds. Not out of cruelty, or not only cruelty, because he needed to learn the weight of relying on someone he had tried to hollow out. When I stood as second speaker, the opposition looked ready to feast. I almost admired them. Then I took the mechanism out of my memory and placed it in the center of the room. The opposition's best concern is not privacy in general, I said. It is deductive identification. The risk that, even without names, context points back to a child. We agree this matters. That is why our model does not publish case narratives. It publishes decision categories at controlled aggregation thresholds. Pens moved. Adrian went still. No dates attached to single incidents.
No classroom identifiers.
No demographic markers where cohort size risks identification. Serious safeguarding matters exempt until risk passes. Independent audit available privately to oversight bodies. Public report designed to expose institutional patterns, not student stories. Dr. Mera's eyes sharpened. There. The door opened. The rest of the speech was mine in a way no trophy could measure. I argued that secrecy protects powerful students more than vulnerable ones, because informal rumors already punish the weak while formal records vanish for the connected. I explained that anonymized pattern publication prevents schools from giving athletes warnings and scholarship students suspensions for similar conduct. I gave a comparative. Opposition protects privacy by trusting institutions that created inconsistent discipline. We protect privacy while limiting institutional discretion through structured transparency. I used Northbridge without naming Northbridge. In any elite school, reputation is a currency. When discipline is hidden, wealthy families can negotiate in private while ordinary families accept decisions as fate. An anonymized register does not expose children. It exposes whether rules are rules or decorations. A sound moved through the audience, the kind people make when a sentence says what they are not allowed to say. Ms. Han looked uncomfortable.
Good.
Some truths should disturb the furniture. By the end, I had not only repaired Adrian's shallow opening, I had made it impossible for him to claim authorship without admitting he had missed the central question. As I sat, Lila squeezed my sleeve under the table. It was quick, hidden, but real. In my first life, I had been alone at the table. In this one, not entirely. The opposition fought hard. Their second speaker attacked enforcement. Their third speaker warned about media misuse, parental witch hunts, and punishment culture disguised as transparency. Marcus stumbled once, but recovered with Lila's whispered timing help. Adrian grew quieter as the round moved away from him. That was new. Usually he inserted himself into every whispered exchange, every prep note, every emotional beat. Now he watched the flow become a map he could not read fully because he had not drawn it. During reply prep, Ms. Han surprised us. She looked at me first. Mira? Just my name. A question and an admission. Adrian's head snapped toward her. I can do reply, he said. I have opening continuity. Ms. Han did not answer immediately. The silence was exquisite. Then Dr. Mira announced 2 minutes to replies and Ms. Han said, Mira has weighing. For words. A tiny funeral for automatic trust. Adrian sat back. His face remained composed, but the boy inside the costume was furious. I almost pitied him. Almost. Then he leaned close and whispered, You planned this. I capped my pen.
No, Adrian.
I prepared. The difference between those words was the distance between theft and skill. My final reply was not loud. I had learned by then that loudness is often where weak arguments hide. I gave the judges one image, 2 locked rooms. In the opposition world, discipline happens in a locked room and the school asks families to trust that justice occurred. In our world, the child's identity remains protected, but the institution must publish enough structured information for the community to see whether justice is consistent. The opposition tells you publication risks shame, I said. We tell you secrecy already creates shame, but distributes it through rumor while protecting official power. Our model interrupts that. It does not tell the community which child fell. It tells the community whether the adults caught some children and quietly carried others. I weighed privacy, accountability, rehabilitation. I conceded that bad publication could harm students, then reminded judges that our model was designed precisely to avoid narrative exposure. I ended with the line I had saved since morning. A school that refuses all transparency in the name of protecting children may be protecting children. Or it may be protecting itself. The difference is impossible to know from behind a locked door. When I sat, the applause came a half-second late, as if the room needed to inhale first. Then it rose, not wild, not shallow, but full. Adrian did not clap. His hands remained folded on the table like evidence of restraint. We won. Unanimous decision. Best Speaker, Mira Chun, Northbridge Academy. My name sounded strange through the microphone, not because I had never wanted it called, but because in my first life it had been called only in accusation. The certificate felt lighter than I expected. Paper always does. The heavy things were invisible, restored breath, corrected memory, a future not yet stolen. Cameras flashed. Ms. Han hugged me stiffly, already rewriting the day in her mind as a story of mentorship. Marcus hooped. Lila actually cried, which startled both of us. Adrian stood beside me for the team photo, smiling perfectly. Anyone looking later would think he was proud. But I felt his shoulder barely touching mine, rigid with contained humiliation. Congratulations, he said through his teeth. Thank you. Enjoy it while it lasts. There was the real speech. Not on stage, not recorded by school cameras, but caught by my phone. Again. I turned my head just enough to meet his eyes. I will. Then I stepped away before the photographer took the second photo, leaving a visible gap between us. It was a small thing, but online, small things become questions. Why is Adrian standing apart from the best speaker? Why does he look angry? Why did Mira take both replies? Why did the semi-final opening sound like he argued half the wrong side? Questions are dangerous in schools built on performance. They travel faster than announcements. By Monday, the clips had spread beyond Northbridge. Debate students are archivists of humiliation and brilliance. They save both with equal devotion. The semi-final video was titled, politely, Northbridge Negative Recovery. The comments were less polite. Someone timestamped Adrian's concessions. Someone else made a split screen of his line. Anonymity creates unaccountable harm, besides Sienna saying, the negative made our case. A university debater wrote, second speaker, hard-carried framework. Another asked, Why did Captain open if he didn't understand burden? That question did more damage than mockery. Mockery can be dismissed as jealousy. Technical critique cannot. Then the final video circulated, and people compared Adrian's opening to my second speech. They noticed the missing mechanism. They noticed who answered poise. They noticed who took reply. For the first time in his school career, Adrian was not being attacked for being cruel. He was being doubted for being average. That hurt him more. Cruelty could be hidden. Mediocrity, once suspected, sticks to every future performance like dust on a black suit. Northbridge responded the way institutions always do when truth appears without permission. They announced a review into online commentary affecting student well-being. Not a review into debate team conduct. Not into why a captain tried to suppress footage. Not into how speaking roles were assigned.
Student well-being.
The phrase arrived in an email with blue borders and no accountability. In my old life, that kind of email would have terrified me. This time, I replied with attachments. Registration photo. Side confirmation email. Priya's initialed sheet. The voice recording of Adrian taking my cards and telling me not to improvise. The hallway recording of his wrist grab and warning. Lila's written statement. The tech volunteer's message apologizing and confirming Adrian asked him to hide the clip. I did not send it to Ms. Han alone. I sent it to Ms. Han, Mr. Calder, the debate council, the scholarship office, and the external adjudication committee that had invited Northbridge to nationals. Subject line. Documentation regarding team conduct and evidence integrity.
No adjectives. No emotional plea.
Just records. The lesson my first life taught me was simple. When you are poor, your pain is considered bias. Documentation speaks the language power pretends to respect. Adrian tried charm first. He found me in the library beside the old biographies, where sunlight fell through the windows in dusty gold strips. This is getting out of hand, he said, soft enough to sound wounded. I know we were tense, but sending recordings? That's not like you. I closed my book. You don't know me. A flicker. Then sadness. Perfectly arranged. I'm worried you're being influenced by people who don't understand our team culture. Team culture. I wondered if villains attended a workshop where they learned to rename harm as atmosphere. You mean Lila? I mean anyone encouraging you to burn bridges. Bridges go both ways, Adrian. You built a toll gate and called it teamwork. His expression tightened. Then he sat across from me without invitation. Withdraw the complaint. There it was, naked beneath the velvet. No, you don't understand what you're doing.
Ido.
My father, he stopped, but not soon enough. I smiled slightly. Yes. He leaned back, recalculating. My family has supported this school for years. If this becomes ugly, people will ask why you waited until after winning to complain. Good, I said. Then I'll explain I waited until I had enough evidence to be believed. The silence after that was different. He finally understood I was not asking for fairness. I was removing his ability to monopolize it. The school investigation lasted 9 days. 9 days is not long, unless you are 17, and every corridor becomes a courtroom. People whispered. Some defended him with religious intensity. Adrian would never. Myra's just ambitious. It's debate. Everyone shares cards. Why was she recording anyway? That last question spread fastest because people are more disturbed by self-protection than by the behavior that makes it necessary. I walked through it all with my blazer neat and my real cards locked in my locker under a new combination. Lila walked with me sometimes. Marcus, too, awkwardly, carrying guilt from a future he did not know had happened. Priya avoided Adrian in hallways. The tech volunteer deleted his foundation internship application and joined the newspaper club instead. Small shifts. Small rebellions. Meanwhile, Adrian's perfection began to fray. He missed a prefect meeting. He snapped at a year 8 who asked for a selfie. He corrected a teacher in class with too much edge, then apologized with too much sweetness. Once, outside the auditorium, I saw him staring at the trophy cabinet where his own reflection overlapped with mine in the glass. For a moment, he looked not evil, not royal, but young and frightened. Then he noticed me, and the fear hardened into hate. I did not look away. Mercy is not the same as amnesia. The hearing happened on a Thursday afternoon in Conference Room 3, where the chairs were too expensive and the walls displayed framed values: respect, integrity, courage. I had seen those words in my first life while begging adults to read my evidence. They had looked decorative then, like plants nobody watered. This time, the room contained Ms. Hahn, Mr. Calder, the deputy principal, a debate council representative, Adrian's father, my mother, and me. My mother wore her work blouse, the blue one with a repaired cuff. She had taken unpaid leave to come. In my first life, she had sat beside me in a similar room, twisting tissues until they shredded, while administrators explained why my conduct reflected poorly on scholarship standards. This time, when Adrian's father began with, "We must be careful not to criminalize normal student collaboration," my mother did not shrink. She placed her hands flat on the table and said, "Then normal collaboration should be easy to explain." I nearly cried. Not because the sentence was dramatic, but because she said it as if my dignity were obvious. Rebirth had given me many things, but hearing my mother defend me before grief taught her caution was one of the few that felt like grace. They played the recordings. Not all at once.
Carefully.
The card exchange. Good girl. Don't improvise. Fix it. The hallway warning. Enjoy it while it lasts. Adrian's face during playback was a masterpiece of controlled injury. He claimed context. He claimed stress. He claimed I had misunderstood. He said debate teams often centralized prep. He said wrist contact was accidental. He said the tech volunteer misinterpreted him. Then Mr. Calder asked why he requested the semi-final opening not be posted separately. Adrian paused too long. His father answered for him. A minor image concern after an uneven performance. The debate council representative, a woman with steel gray hair and no patience for perfume, looked over her glasses. Uneven because your son argued several affirmative burdens while speaking negative? Adrian's father flushed. Adrian looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw the question he could not ask aloud. How did you know where to place the trap? I wanted to tell him death is an excellent coach. Instead, I said nothing. Silence can be a locked door, too. The decision was not as cinematic as revenge fantasies promise. Adrian was not dragged from the room. His father did not fall to his knees. The school did not publicly confess every sin. Real institutions rarely collapse in one blow. They leak. The committee found serious breaches of team conduct, inappropriate control of peer materials, attempted interference with publication of tournament footage, and unacceptable physical contact. Adrian lost captaincy. He was suspended from inter-school debate for the remainder of the season. His national recommendation was withdrawn pending review. Ms. Hahn received a formal warning for inadequate supervision and speaker allocation practices. Northbridge had to implement written evidence sharing protocols and student consent rules. To anyone outside, it may have sounded mild. To Adrian, it was exile. His power had lived in informal control, in being the person everyone automatically trusted before procedure entered the room. Procedure was now entering every room ahead of him. That was enough. At the end, the deputy principal asked whether I wanted mediation. I looked at Adrian. He looked back with hatred dressed as hurt. "No," I said. "I want distance." My mother's hand found mine under the table. The strangest thing about surviving a ruined future is that victory does not immediately teach your body it is safe. For weeks after the hearing, I still woke before dawn with my heart racing, expecting emails that did not come, accusations that had not been made, headlights in rain. I kept copies of everything in 3 places. I checked side allocations obsessively. I memorized every card even when I had printed backups. People praised my discipline, not knowing it was trauma wearing a blazer. But life also began to offer small, ordinary gifts, and I learned to accept them awkwardly. Lila started sitting with me at lunch, claiming she needed help with economics when really she hated her old table. Marcus asked if we could rebuild the debate team, less dictatorish. Priya waved at me across assemblies. Sienna Park messaged me after finals with one sentence. Your anonymization mechanism was annoyingly good. I stared at that message for 5 minutes and laughed until my brother asked if I was broken. Maybe I was. Maybe I was breaking correctly this time, away from silence instead of into it. Adrian changed too, but not into someone better. That would have been too neat. He became quieter, sharper, more careful about witnesses. His admirers reduced but did not vanish. Princes do not lose kingdoms overnight when half the kingdom is in love with the idea of them. Some people decided I had destroyed him out of jealousy. Others decided he had made one mistake and suffered enough. A few teachers treated me like a legal hazard rather than a student. But the important difference was this: their opinions no longer controlled the official story. My name remained on the championship record. My scholarship remained untouched. My best speaker certificate hung above my desk, not because trophies matter more than peace, but because this one marked the day my voice returned to my own body. Adrian still passed me in hallways. Sometimes he smiled. Sometimes I smiled back. Not warmly, not cruelly, just enough to remind him that I was not afraid of being seen. The final confrontation came at graduation, months later, because boys like Adrian cannot resist choosing symbolic settings for private threats. The ceremony was held on the oval under white marquees, with parents fanning themselves and teachers pretending not to cry. I had been accepted into the National Youth Policy Fellowship, the one Adrian had wanted as his replacement debate credential after losing captaincy. He had still won prizes, still received applause, still posed for photos with relatives who looked at me like I had scratched a family heirloom. I was near the back of the hall after collecting my certificate when he appeared beside the display of old debate trophies. "You know," he said, "before all this, I actually respected you." I adjusted the folder in my arms. "Before all this, you thought I was useful." He laughed softly. "You always need to make yourself the victim." There was a time that sentence would have hooked into me. Girls like me are trained to fear seeming dramatic more than being harmed. But I had lived one life apologizing for wounds other people gave me. I did not plan to waste the second doing translations for him. "No," I said. "A victim is someone the story ends with." I continued. His face hardened. "You think you won because you're smarter?"
No.
"I won because I stopped handing my work to someone who needed it more than I did." For once, he had no answer ready. The trophies behind him reflected our faces in warped gold, his beautiful and furious, mine calm and unfamiliar. As I walked away, he said my name. Not Mira, softly like before. Mira, sharp as a thrown pin. I turned. "What?" He looked around, making sure no one was close enough to hear. "Still careful. Always careful. You're going to spend your whole life proving people wrong," he said. "That gets lonely." I thought about my first life. The empty kitchen after my mother's late shifts, the appeal letters, the rain, the applause that was not mine. Then I thought about this life. Lila saving the clip, Marcus rebuilding the team charter, Priya initialing the sheet, Sienna's annoying compliment, my mother's hand flat on the conference table. "Maybe," I said. "But it's less lonely than spending your life hoping no one proves you ordinary." That landed. I saw it land because his expression went blank, and blankness was what Adrian wore when pain arrived faster than performance. I left him there beside the trophies, surrounded by all the gold that had once convinced me he was untouchable. Years later, people would ask me when I became fearless. They always expected a grand answer. The final round. The hearing. The moment Adrian argued the wrong side with my decoy cards in his hands. But fearlessness is mostly a myth told by people watching from safe seats. I was afraid in the prep room. I was afraid on stage. I was afraid sending the email. I was afraid sitting across from his father. Courage did not feel like fire. It felt like keeping the real cards hidden until it was time to speak. It felt like documenting the truth before begging anyone to care. It felt like letting a thief steal exactly what I wanted him to steal, then refusing to rescue him from the consequences of his own performance. In my first life, applause marked the end of me. In my second, applause became background noise. The real victory was quieter, my own voice, steady under fluorescent lights, saying the correct side at last. And if you were wondering whether I ever threw away the decoy cards, I didn't. I kept them in a sealed envelope behind my best speaker certificate, all blue, green, yellow, and red, pretty as a warning. Sometimes, when I doubt myself, I take them out and read the first line Adrian stole. "We do not defend cruelty." It still makes me smile. Not because the line was brilliant, not because it won the round, but because the boy who built his kingdom on other people's words finally chose the wrong ones. He stood in front of judges, parents, cameras, and the whole glittering machinery of Northbridge Academy, and with absolute confidence, he argued himself into defeat. He thought my cards were the weapon. He never understood that the real weapon was knowing exactly who he was and letting him prove it out loud.